It's not that sad, just extremely frustrating. It broke me. We knew one another since we were children, and it began as an honest relationship when we were 8 on a jungle gym where we used to play together. From that point forward, we lost contact. I was SAID when I was around 16, and I went through a great deal of treatment and injury. That is the point at which I recollected that him. I chose to message him, and from that point forward, all we did all day was discussion with one another. I educated him regarding all of that. And that is the point at which a delightful fellowship transformed into a not exactly satisfying relationship. It began mystically. We did without question everything together. He met the guardians pretty from the get-go, and when he was resting over, all we did was discussion and sit peacefully, and it was enough as far as we were concerned. Quick forward to 2 years into our relationship. We began battling on the grounds that we both began acting poisonous to one another. We were harmful towards one another, yet we generally found our strategy for getting around it, and we generally kept on living as though nothing had occurred, and we discussed our coexistences. One night, everything changed when we went to a club with several companions, and he began hitting the dance floor with one more young lady when I went outside to light a cigarette. I moved toward him and smacked him across the face and left. I excused him. I knew she was twerking on him. We continued on from that evening, and he began school. I was in my last year of secondary school. I'm European, so it checks out and isn't peculiar. And we had floated, separated. That is the point at which I figured out he was going behind my back with several young ladies from school. I was totally shattered, and I was totally prepared to take him back, since he had the daringness to say a final farewell to me, not the opposite way around. I began having self-destructive contemplations, so I attempted to end it all and was getting help as a result of the injury he had gave me. Eventually, I went through treatment due to the injury he caused for me. Hi everyone. The past few days have been some of the worst of my life, and I'm not sure exactly what to think or do. This is my most memorable time posting on here, so if it's not too much trouble, hold on for me each time I recollect the second. I got him with my closest companion, who I've known since we were youngsters. I need to actually ward off the desire to upchuck. In some cases, the strain on my chest will be too much that it damages to relax. I haven't eaten. I've scarcely rested. I've needed to involve a couple of individual days, these beyond couple of days, as I couldn't in fact understand escaping my bed, not to mention heading into work. I, 24, have had no great explanation to trust that my sweetheart, 26, could at any point do this to me. Deceive me, embarrass me like this. I met my sweetheart when I was an undergrad, my first year. He was 2 years into his science certification. We met at a party that his brotherhood was facilitating. We've been really indivisible since he previously asked me out. He is my closest companion, my individual. We have the sort of closeness that you don't get with a lot of individuals in a lifetime, and I've continually needed to squeeze myself all through my relationship each time I check his attractive face. He's the sort of man that would request that I slow dance in our kitchen to my numero, John Mayer melody. I would frequently mess with him at whatever point he would return home. Indeed, we share a loft together from the exercise center or work somewhat later than expected, and inquire as to whether he'd been out mind-blowingly another young lady. I would ask how the sex was, and assuming she was superior to me. Be that as it may, these discussions were generally in great tomfoolery, never serious. We would constantly wind up ignoring it, because the possibility of him each wandering is such a long ways from the real truth. He's continually consoling me that I don't have anything to stress over, that he adores me so profoundly, he picks me regular, and that he would get it inked on his skin, assuming it implied that much to me. Clearly, I let him know he would do nothing of the sort. He truly is all that I might at any point need in an accomplice. He was my beginning, which makes what happened all the seriously sickening. This previous Saturday, I was called into work. I'm a medical caretaker, however, am simply beginning at this spot, so it is exceptionally common for somebody in my situation to begin on standby. A shared companion of my beau and I was setting up birthday celebration out on his lake house and asked my sweetheart and I to come. My best friend at 24, for who I assume is currently my ex-best friend, was additionally going to be there. She and I went to a similar school. However, we're in various majors. She has been seeing someone, yet is what I call a chronic dater. Another person like clockwork or thereabouts. I never had any motivation to think anything was occurring among her and my sweetheart, as they were dependably agreeable and got along fine and dandy. We would eat takeout together at our lounge area table at whatever point she'd visit, and their discussion was in every case extremely superficial. The sort of relationship you would anticipate between a more seasoned sibling and more youthful sister. Furthermore, on the off chance that she'd remain the evening, she and I would rest together in my bed, and my bayou would take the sofa in the lounge room at his demand. Her and I graduated secondary school and school together. And keeping in mind that I haven't had as a very remarkable opportunity to hang with her starting as of late, she is right now in school for her Lords. Because of our bustling timetable, I never ever might have anticipated she would do this to me. So last Saturday, I let my bayou know that I would attempt to come to our companion's party. However, he ought to go have a great time. At first he yielded, saying he was fine remaining in, yet at long last surrendered and consented to go first. I wound up getting to leave my shift somewhat early, simply past 11 p.m. I had been messaging Jazz napping him over the course of the evening, and he quit answering a short while after 10. Once more, I had not an obvious explanation to be dubious or worried by any means. As I confided in this man totally and completely, I didn't really show up until a brief time after 12 p.m. at the lake house, and shockingly found many individuals were there. I couldn't get tightly to my bayou or my best friend, which I figured was fine and credited it to her having allowed her telephone to bite the dust. In the wake of making a few inquiries, including the birthday kid, I was told to attempt one of the numerous higher-up rooms. He wasn't in any of the rooms. However, as I drew closer the ensuite of the expert, I heard groaning and what plainly seemed like two individuals fucking. I will always remember the manner in which time stopped as I opened that entryway, finding my bayou of 6 years covered somewhere inside my best friend. I was unable to track down it in me to really express anything at that time. I assume I was in shock or something like that. Solely after he saw me remaining there did I wake up from my fleeting shock and ran out of there. Both he and my best friend were totally bare, scrambling to get their garments back on, he guaranteeing it was a slip-up and that he was so grieved I could smell the bourbon on his breath. So he was obviously tipsy. I think they were both crying. I can't muster the energy to care. I was unable to try and truly see past a couple of feet before me. I attempted to inhale, particularly with the generally jam-packed air of the house. He had a go at taking hold of my arm to inspire me to pay attention to him, however, solely after yelling at him to not touch me. Did he let me go? At the point when I made it home, I quickly looked into latest possible moment administrations to get my locks changed, which were finished eventually the following evening. Both he and my best friend have been exploding my telephone with messages, calls, solicitations to FaceTime. I was unable to force myself to take a gander at any of the messages. I've quite recently been so numb to the world. My whole companion bunch has been messaging me as well. They can all get screwed as far as I might be concerned. He hasn't tried to come home in the past few days. He probably suspects that I need space after I so blatantly caught him balls deep in someone else. My best friend, I figure he may be remaining with her. I'm crushed. This feeling that I'm going through, I could never wish on anybody. He is the final part of my heart. I believed that I planned to wed this man. I saw everything with him. He was my future. Also, she was my dearest companion. Please accept my apologies for the novel-length post, yet obviously I expected to get a portion of this out. I don't know what to do straight away. I will not answer any of their texts. A piece of me has engaged the possibility of simply icing them out, complete cutoff with correspondence. Get a couple of my companions to move his poo out onto the control. We on the whole own this condo, so at last we might have to sort out what occurs with it. I'm simply so lost. Assuming anybody has gone through something almost identical like this, any inspirational statements would be so profoundly appreciated. I can't seem to get any of that from my life right now. I'm so fucking tired of crying, and yet every time I entertain images of that night, my traitorous eyes start up again.
In 2017, I coordinated with this delightful man on Tinder. We were simply getting on one another's nerves every step of the way. He stuck out, he wasn't like every other person, so buzzword I know. Anyway, he let me know he was conveyed for a long. We talked each and every day, no matter what my schedule. I work shift and a 6.5-hour time distinction between us. No other person appeared to be fascinating any longer. My main center was him. I was so gruffly legitimate about what my identity was, so he knew precisely exact thing was sitting tight for him after getting back to the States. We discussed marriage, kids, beginning a family together. In a real sense, all that to examine we did. The general mishmash, every last bit of it. There was no leaf left unturned. Quick forward 5 months of being together, however informal, we at long last meet face to face. Things are astonishing. We authoritatively are dating. Things are perfect. He moves into my home after 90 days subsequent to escaping the military. He reserved each option to leave the state, since he wasn't from here, yet remained for me. Things kicked harsh once he off school. However, it was a totally different world for him. I gave him his distance and space he really wanted. Since changing into regular citizen lift on top of a culture shock, as it were, of getting back to tutoring 6 years over is difficult. We traveled during winter break. This is the point at which he owned up to me. He never needed to get hitched and additionally have children. I've forever been vacillating of having children, yet having the choice on the table was all I thought often about. I was good with being the eternity GF after our discussion. A tad to quit thinking about marriage. Be that as it may, I turned out to be good with it after a piece, since I would have rather not lost him. I thought things were great between us. Then, at that point, he began to miss truly significant subtleties. Dates and so on. He failed to remember our commemoration. And it was, by all accounts, a descending winding from that. In the long run, he was conversing with his great female companion from back home. Right now, we're together for almost 1.5 years, and he's never referenced her as an old buddy previously. I never at any point met her when we visited his old neighborhood, so she was unable to be an extraordinary companion. I just had this hunch something was off base. Extremely off base. Regardless of how I moved, I was excessively close to home. My inclination were never substantial as he would see it. I have a lot of time to burn and so forth. Things got exceptionally unpleasant between us as of now. We separated. He still lived with me since he didn't know anybody in the I felt appreciate that is the least I could do in light of the fact that he remained here for me. We talked after dust settled perhaps 7 days a short time later and consented to be together and to take care of our problems and meet up once more. Yet, not official. We began snoozing bed together once more, and it felt astonishing to be pursuing something great again with him. Until this one night I was unable to rest. There was simply something wrong. I was unable to demonstrate it, yet my stomach let me know something was off. Come to figure out, that old buddy and him began sexting each other and wanted to get together when he was returning to visit his town in about 14 days. On top of that, he was going out on dates with young ladies from grounds. It annihilated me. My trust was broken. We split again after that. Then, at that point, he understood he needed to accompany me, so we were anticipating keeping in touch with each other, not dating others or laying down with others. A couple of days after the fact, he's leaving for his old neighborhood. At the point when my dearest companion sends me a screenshot of his internet dating profile. I requested to see his telephone, and he gave it to me. I opened the application, and he said it was from previously, and that he neglected to erase it. I thoroughly searched in the messages, and when I was dozing close to him 2 hours earlier, he was inquiring as to whether they needed to exchange pictures. I've never felt more low and discouraged than that second, before he left to visit his old neighborhood once more. I beseeched him not to leave. I beseeched him to remain to sort this out. He actually left. I lost all kind of feelings for a really long. I kept in touch with him, In the meantime, these burner Instagram accounts were sending me messages saying he was resting near and back on web-based dating applications. He denied it. Again, no confirmation, so I was unable to demonstrate anything. He welcomed me down to his folks' spot and I went. 2 days in the wake of arriving, I was unable to shake the inclination he was concealing something from me. So I let him know I have a similar hunch as in the past, and I realized something occurred, and to simply tell me he at long last owned up to laying down with others after what appeared to be long periods of squabbling to and fro. I leave a couple of days after the fact to get back. We become distance. I was done finished. I bounced back rapidly and wound up dating. I didn't be aware at that point, a working alcoholic who was likewise into coke. Most definitely about that, it was a very short-lived relationship, grain 4 months, which finished in me getting close to home and truly manhandled, and afterward, I got a controlling request against him. Military man was there for me through the entire thing. It's like he understood what I was going through before I even cut off the friendship with the homegrown victimizer. He connected with me when I really wanted him the most. Homegrown victimizer broke into my home 2 months after I severed things with him, with having zero contact with him in that 2 months. Military man truly moved forward and helped me through that whole time span of my life, being there for me through late evenings, vast gatherings with my legal advisors, trials deferred, all the digital following and dangers from homegrown victimizer, and the genuine trial. We got into a great spot once more, constructing together, becoming somebody each other could depend on once more. Then things began to slip once more. Dates would be neglected, putting need on investing energy with collaborators over me, and so forth. Mind you, as of now, he adores around 30 minutes away. What's more, we seldom see each other in light of my shift work, his school timetable and plan for getting work done consolidated. Sundays were generally our days we seen one another. He would continuously home base with his colleagues, leave me unconveyed or begin a contention prior to going out. The reasons were consistently something similar. My sentiments were never legitimate reactions to his activities. Things got significantly hazier than previously. Innumerable anxiety attacks on my end, in light of the fact that the gaslighting won't ever stop. It was dependably my shortcoming. I ought not be so touchy. He ought to have time alone with his companions, which I get, yet I've never met any of these companions. He needed to keep his social and heartfelt lives isolated. We got into this huge contention, which finished in me having a fit of anxiety on his restroom floor. I was unable to move. At the point when I did, I just got the entirety of my things and left. It resembled a switch flicked to me, and things won't change. Regardless of what he shared with me, his activities never supported up his promise, so we severed it for good. So we thought. A couple of months goes by. There's no connecting, nothing. I go over him super preferring me on kindling once. We have this extraordinary profound discussion, truly laying everything out there for each other. He erased his TikTok account. However, inside those months of no contact, I would send him every one of the recordings I seen that just helped me to remember him, notwithstanding what it was. I sent them to his new record, so he could see them. He appears as though he's in a superior spot. He's getting help for his responsibility issues to endeavor to turn into the individual who he needs to be, who he says he is. He's dealing with himself. There was so many time I needed to connect and let him know how I'm feeling, yet I proved unable. We bid farewell, however, here we were reconnecting once more. We don't have the foggiest idea what to do or say as of now. It's damn almost 3 a.m. We choose it's ideal to nod off and convey again when we both wake up. So we do. We meet for lunch a couple of days after the fact so we could examine what turned out badly in the relationship. His thought, his words. We go to lunch. He doesn't make reference to a solitary things about what occurred. Simply getting up to speed like a companion you haven't seen since secondary school. Fundamentally the way in which I can depict the subjects of conversation. A short time later he strolls me to my vehicle, had a go at kissing me. I pull away and say I can't do this with him. He vowed not to cross a line. Also, here he was going too far. I return home and break down since he hasn't, not the slightest bit. It might appear to be stupid that I was finished thing time since we didn't adhere to the arguments over lunch, Yet this was the last thing that could possibly be tolerated. I go no contact once more, yet for good this time. I was so finished with him, I start to continue on. After 90 days, he texts me, "I miss you" at 4:23 a.m. I disregard it. I haven't gotten one more message from him. 2 months after the instant message, he solicitation to follow my Instagram. I acknowledge, however, nothing has been said since. Yet, I actually think about him consistently. I love him. I'm so frantically, profoundly enamored with him. I would successfully fulfill that man, yet he can't keep me cheerful. There was simply a lot of tension on him. It all makes sense to me. I'm a ton to deal with. That's what he knew. He knew precisely who in need he was getting into since November 21, 27. There's nothing on earth I wouldn't do for you, cupcake man. I love you for eternity. You consume my contemplations. I know it's just a tad unreasonable for anybody in my life, but rather I can't quit considering you. In any case, it's past the point of no return now. You're continuing on. I continued on. Frankie, you're my...
I've been dating my boyfriend for 10 years. In his previous life, he was an alcoholic, and now he has a relapse. We had to part ways because he was an alcoholic who had relapsed. He needed to zero in on himself. He loved me, thought often about me, thought I was wonderful and hot, and we had comparative qualities. Yet, he needed to zero in on his well-being and himself, so we needed to head out in different directions. We didn't get to begin a relationship. We were talking situationship for around a half year before I could confront realities and let him go. Truth is that I was enamored bad. To the bone, ick on the off chance that he felt the same way. I realize he enjoyed me and everything except adoration. I don't know. I actually think he has a place with me, and I with him, yet I'm simply residing with those considerations, attempting to now pay them any psyche, since it feels woeful to cherish a man who doesn't adore me. We concurred no contact with the exception of letters, and I sent 2 or 3 cards, nothing weighty or serious in them, and I didn't get anything back. At the point when I was around him, I embraced a new lease on life, similar to the individual I generally needed to be. I long for himself and miss him. We said we would reach out after he'd been level, headed a year. That date is quick drawing nearer, and I'm not anticipating a call, simply living with my fantasies and expectations. I needed to adore him, and how him my adoration. Ike, how disastrous it is. I simply realize I care for himself, and I need him so much. And I maintain that he should be solid, and I trust his process is working out in a good way. We were significant distance as well. Hadn't seen him face to face in quite a while. I actually recall that we used to spend what felt like hours, ecstatic hours, kissing and holding one another. First time we met, we both did a 2-fold take. At the point when we kissed, my psyche would go, not clear yet, just something great occurred. I didn't think, I just felt. I've let him know how he affects me. I can't any longer. Presently, he can return assuming he's prepared when that date comes. However, I don't figure he will. I mean, how might this try and work out? I simply realize I'm enamored even after 5 months of no contact. At the point when I would hear his voice and see his face, or simply be around him, I would feel like I was home. I'd on the off chance that I ought to let him know everything sometime in the not-so-distant future. I would rather not embarrass myself. I simply want to have met face to face, and I might have had one final kiss, in the event that it wasn't intended to be. Then, at that point, I could have no less than one final hug. We never at any point got to have intercourse, and I wish we had. I'm frozen in time expecting him to come for me. I can't converse with anyone about this. I know it's not cool to adore somebody who doesn't cherish you back. Presently, everything revolves around picking yourself, which I attempted to do. That is the reason I must be the one to say stop no more. I simply trust for the day after the 1-year point comes. Since when my telephone doesn't ring, when the message doesn't come, I'll realize I can continue on. I'll mend, and I'll push ahead. I couldn't care less assuming I at any point love once more. Doesn't make any difference. I'll venture to the far corners of the planet. I'll search out my joys and fun. In the meantime, I'll miss him less every day, I trust. On the off chance that he read this, he may be frightened off. Furthermore, likely for good explanation, perhaps I'm not in adoration. Am I simply a young lady with issues? I have to take a hard pass. I've really focused on this person for a considerable length of time. I thought it was finished. In any case, he returned and maybe no time had elapsed. I want to have gone through one day together, holding his hand, feeling his body breathing in his fragrance, seeing his grin face to face, making him chuckle and seeing his eyes sparkle so brilliant and his smile worried and timid and dicey and humble. I love you to such an extent. I like you to such an extent. However, I'll be fine. I'm fine.
From England, and 10 years ago, I met a girl online from America. We talked constantly for right around 3 years and went through a few horrendous minutes in both our lives. Above all, following 3 years, it was easy to say I love her. In addition, I realized she felt the same way. We would go through a long stretch of time simply talking and chuckling and having this extraordinary relationship. So 3 years in, I'm similar to, I want to meet this young lady and check whether I truly love her. This, perhaps my main opportunity at adoration. So I traveled to America for a multi-week stay with her. When we showed up at her place, the majority of our garments were free and we moved around on the floor for a long while. Following 14 days, it was completely clear we adored each other as of now. The day preceding I leave, we have intercourse. So like grown-ups, we got a next day contraceptive for around $50, perhaps more. Just excessively take no chance. The day I leave, we are sat in our vehicle in the air terminal. We are both crying, and all aspects of me would have rather not returned home, as I previously felt I was home. My visa just had 7 months left on it, and I supposed on the off chance that I remained, I wouldn't have the option to get another one. Recollect that I am pondering this while crying, WW, talking, embracing, and so forth, and just had 2 hours. Furthermore, she didn't know what we could do, all things considered. So this choice jumbled my life straight up. I returned on the plane once again to the UK. Return home, and the young lady states she figures she could be pregnant, or she believes she is. So she began doing many tests, however, nothing. Around 2 months after the fact, she's pregnant. Simply an expectation. Yes, I know for 100% the child is mine. I really thought exactly the same thing. So the arrangement was recharge my visa, get together my life, and fuck off to America wrongfully. We both concurred, and if nothing else, I could be a stay-at-home father. Say a month prior to she conceives an offspring, I leave for America. I get to my first layover in quite a while, go through checks and go snatch my bag. 1 minute from now, a tap on my shoulder inquiring as to whether I could come along these lines. I became examined regarding my excursion and where I was going and so forth, and I could answer everything and they could look at it. Then at that point, all of a sudden they say, are you anticipating remaining in the States? I'm like, I have a visa for a considerable length of time and a return flight back. Then at that point came the assuming you lie, you will go to jail. So I was like, I'm a UK resident who entirely misunderstands, sat idle, and you're hinting me for no great explanation. There was an explanation, I was paused. And I'll share close to you, so kindly set me on a plane back to Britain. I'm at this air terminal for more than 15 hours with no telephone. A pregnant GF has no clue what's occurring, and I wouldn't have shown up at her air terminal, and she has no real way to reach me. We return accompanied by furnished police to a plane, once again to Britain, where on appearance I'm met by somebody who conciliatory sentiments and states this happens a lot. Right now I have no energy to say poo. I simply need to escape the spot and converse with my GF. First and herself, I need to go to my folk spot and remain. Following a couple days, my more youthful sister said, unfortunate, you didn't get into America. We are not close and barely talk. So I inquired as to, for what reason would I say I was unfortunate? My shock, she basically said, I ensured you wouldn't get in. Truly, I could have killed her, yet figured I will get one more flight and express nothing to nobody. I attempt to set up my istat, which you want for movement in the States, and it fizzled. After loads of fucking around, I figured out I was unable to get one for perhaps a year or two. I didn't mind why, as my reality recently disintegrated. We miss my child being conceived. My GF must manage this by itself. This put gigantic burden on us as a team. This was the saddest I've at any point felt in my life. It makes me cry simply composing this. When our child was conceived, we found it hard to converse with one another since it would make us both miserable and cry pretty much without fail. Additionally, I love her, so how could I need her in such a lot of aggravation when her life has been flipped around in view of my fucking more youthful sister? And after 90 days, I was determined to have colitis and required steroids. No issue, take the pills, except for I had an open pinal sinus, which cause of the striads exacerbated that. So my main choice was a medical procedure. After 5 months, my GF actually talked week after week, disliked B4. Then at that point, 4 months on, another sinus opens up in my back. This shouldn't have occurred, and this time I would require an activity and plastic medical procedure. It required 4 years to get it really fixed, and even right up till now, I cannot sit up straight for longer than 30 minutes. Following 3 years of our child being conceived, we somewhat self-destructed as it was only excessively hard for the two of us. Life just appeared to be so ill-fated, it was fucking awful. Present day, so 6 years after my child was conceived, the majority of my issues are either arranged or taken care of now. Yeah, I truly need to connect, as my child will be talking now, and I'd very much want to hear his little voice. I don't know whether she's continued on for sure. However, I can't resist the urge to figure out how to let them be and not simply spring up out of the blue and convolute their life more than I, as of now, have. Furthermore, yes, I can get my stuff for movement now. After a few years of a pen pal relationship, I finally wanted to marry her, but she has turned into a feminist over these few years. I met her when I was a green bean in college. We met on the web through a game. She was a senior in secondary school. We would wind up talking in and beyond game for quite a long time, many days. Initially, everything was simply companionship. For hell's sake, she handily turned into my dearest companion. We shared our difficulties and our mysteries. The relationship bloomed after I was educating her regarding one of the crackpots I had been with, and her remark was, all things considered, what might be said about me? I felt weak at the knees over her, yet consistently accepted it was one way, so never acted. We turned out to be nearer. I was managing some downturn, wrong school, wrong major, and so the profound association between us was to such an extent that we typically realized what was the deal with the other in light of our decision alone. I left school for another 2 years, thought more year, and changed to a nearby school. Things murmured along pleasantly for that year until we both quit playing the game and I wound up expecting to move cross country. At the point when I told her I was moving to Seattle, she recommended we get a spot together after I get my feet on the ground. I faltered, not understanding what in blazes I was doing with my life. I didn't have training, didn't have a lifelong arrangement, and didn't have the foggiest idea how I would have been taking care of business after I arrived. I didn't have a response for her and needed to complete the discussion when I had some better sense. The reaction I got was a frail, all right, and her logging off right away. I didn't see her again for 7 days. In the wake of moving, I was remaining with more distant family without ordinary web access. I quit having my everyday contact with her. However, we actually had each other's cell numbers and would message. Neither of us were enthusiastic about chatting on the telephone. When I moved, settled up, it was 9 months after I moved and I needed to complete the discussion with her about going along with me. We set up a chance to talk, yet she didn't show. I figured she was as yet pissed at me for not trying to say yes prior, so didn't harp a lot on it. We talked less and less as often as possible after that. She lost her cell phone and didn't have the assets to supplant it. Didn't tell me until I asked why she was significantly more calm. Calm spells were normal to our relationship, where it would drive the other to ponder what was happening and advise ourselves that we were both more joyful with one another than without, yet all the same, this actually appeared to be changed. However, the situation were different now. At the point when we wound up talking, we would wind up squabbling about each seemingly insignificant detail. I definitely knew by then that our relationship was having some time off. However, neither of us expressed anything about it. Years passed, and I wound up returning to college and completing a degree. I was taking a gander at my profession ahead and conceivable master's level college, and had the choice to draw nearer to her. I reached out with her and we attempted to update one another. Discovered that she had been locked in to somebody that she began seeing right about when I would have been welcoming her to go along with me. I likewise discovered that commitment failed to work out. However, I never realized the reason why. I advised her that I actually thought she was extraordinary, and if she needed to seek after something, she ought to converse with me. The reaction I had was a whammy. The first was that my timing sucked, as she was caught up with loathing men. The second was that she could never date somebody she met on the web. The third is that it had been a very long time since we'd been in customary contact, and that we've both changed. At long last was that we were just ever companions. Dear companions, yet companions. The last part flipped around my reality. I didn't have the foggiest idea about how we might have both been in a similar relationship and had such various translations to what I love you implied. I didn't have any idea what to tell her accordingly. I felt like I'd been destroyed. The main reaction I had was to get to know one another again, first and afterwards, see from that point. My certainty was shot, and it followed through in the entirety of our discussions. We kind of talked for the following 18 months, having exceptionally abnormal discussions. There would be long quietness spells, and I couldn't be sure whether I was affronting her or, on the other hand, assuming it was the new commonplace. It was like, I wound up going to my cousin's wedding and saw both cheerful and troubled couples. My folks had been thinking about separating and were in a disagreement. At that point, I understood, notwithstanding that this young lady was who I needed to go through my time on Earth with, the young lady I needed to safeguard and support. I told her so much, I didn't get a reaction. The following month, my canine died from a stroke. I believed somebody should converse with, and she's who rung a bell. I requested that she carve out the opportunity to talk with me. However, the reaction I had was that I was transformed into somebody very off-kilter who just made her self-conscious and that I ought to have a pleasant life. I fell to pieces and probably drove her away for good. It's been a year now, and the sum total of what I have is misery over the whole circumstance. Assuming that I had expressed yes to moving in together such an extremely long time back, I have no question we would have hitched. The event that I'd found her when she missed our gathering. Rather than expecting she was pissed, it might have been unique. Assuming I kept my head while reconnecting, the situation might have been unique. There was youthfulness on all sides in what went down between us. The attempt to take part in casual discussion with her like clockwork, however, she hasn't answered. Overall, I ought to be content today. I moved to Europe to go to graduate school. I've had the option to see and live in a region of the planet that a couple of have the open door to them. Graduating to a six-figure pay, even in this crappy economy. I understand what I deeply desire, and I'm pursuing it ordinary. In case some portion of me is simply unfilled inside. Like there's a piece missing where she was. Some way or another, I went from somebody that could talk 30 hours of the week with her to somebody that just made her anxious. I've acquired issues in trusting individuals with my internal considerations. So project another persona. I don't know. I don't know I at any point hope to give somebody access once more. I believe I'm continuously going to cherish her. Happened. My wife left me and took our kids. We don't communicate anymore. All my attempts to fix things only make things worse. Each time my attitude towards me from my ex and the kids gets worse. I will write for myself to not forget anything and to keep track of changes in the situation. I'm 48 years old. I work in a large international company. We live in a metropolis, not the capital. And my wife is 39 years old. 20 years in a relationship, 15 of them in marriage. Children, like a boy 6 years old and a girl 14 years old. 20 years down the drain. I did not expect such an outcome. In 2000, in the company of mutual friends, I met a girl, Lena, my future wife, and the mother of my children. At that time, she was dating one guy from this company. I liked her Later on, I beat her away from him. We were not friends. We started dating, love, a storm of emotions. With me for the first time, visited the sea, also traveled to Moscow, and Peter gave her gifts, beautifully courted. A few months later, I suggested that she move in together. At the time, she was still studying at the Institute, and I was already working and felt quite confident. In 2005, we got married, and right after that, we had a baby. Quite a typical story. Everything was going quite well. I had a one-room, but with a good meter apartment, not a bad car. I was rising up the career ladder. I had enough money. Things were going well with her parents, too. She always looked me in the mouth and listened to my stories. I have a degree in engineering, and I'm also seriously interested in history. My wife always said that I was the smartest person she had ever talked to, and that this was what turned her on and attracted her the most. Even after the baby was born, we had sex often. Unless she was lying, we're completely satisfied in terms of intimacy. During the marriage, I had a few affairs on the side, mostly on business trips. My wife did not know about it. She had nothing like that, as she was a typical housewife and stayed at home until the birth of the second child. After the birth of the second child, it was time to increase the living space. We sold my one-room apartment, added maternity capital, and took a 3-room apartment in our city in mortgage. Spending started to increase a lot. Mortgage and loan payments, repairs, purchase of household appliances, increased expenses for children. I began to work more. A good thing in the service, there is an opportunity to take additional projects and get paid for them over time. Because of this, we started seeing each other less. I came home late, often sitting in the kitchen late at the computer. I always had enough money for my basic expenses, but my trips became less frequent. We used to be able to go abroad a couple times a year, but now only once, and that was to our coast. I restricted my wife in what she wanted, and because of that, there were a lot of fights. After work, I had no energy left for anything, and usually just lay on the sofa in front of the TV, sometimes with a beer moderately. Sitting up late in the kitchen, could afford to play old toys or online tanks later. All this will be presented to me in the form of claims in an exaggerated form. But overall, I still felt like we were a family. We still had sex, albeit not as often anymore. She told me she loved me and cared for me as much as she could. The house was always clean. I always had a hot dinner waiting for me, and the kids were well groomed. The eldest at school, and after the section is seriously engaged in gymnastics. The youngest in the afternoon in kindergarten. The beginning of the problems, when the son went to kindergarten, my wife decided to start looking for a job. According to her, she needed a new job in order to buy herself clothes and generally have the means to look after herself. At first, I was against it because in general, all the family expenses on me, and if she would help at least with her $15,000-$20,000 together would be noticeably easier. But soon I realized that it is for the best. She will have her own money and our scandals will stop. And if I work harder, I can increase my income. In total, she looked for work for almost a year. I had already started to persuade her to give it up all the time. There were probationary periods without pay or some murky offices. In general, no results. I suggested first to go somewhere to study because her old diploma can only wipe today. Suddenly, she got a job in an office where she was happy with everything. The work is not difficult. To communicate with clients about the apartments rented by the developer, documents showing housing. All of this does not require special skills except the ability to communicate with people and neat, pleasant appearance. She has all this, so she was hired right away. After a few months, I noticed a change in her behavior. She was getting colder to me. Her attention to household and children decreased. No more hot dinners after work, as she would come back later than me. I started picking up my son from daycare too. Not that it all stressed me much. I was alarmed by the way my wife began to get her nose in the air, how she changed in communication with me. Sex became less and less frequent. Reproaches began to pour on me constantly. I cut her off as best I could. After all, I'm older than her and I am a man. But gradually I began to bend because I didn't want to quarrel in the evenings. Also, my wife was suddenly promoted at work. She started disappearing in the office for longer, and she joined a fitness program. I had even more responsibilities at home, and she continued to put the increased salary in her pocket again. I did not say anything against her because the quarrels became so much that it was as if I became afraid of her. Started paying attention to her texts. At home, she never let her phone out of her hands, and her laptop was locked and password protected. She had new friends and male acquaintances, and I had a lot of reasons to be jealous. That lingers after work longer than usual, that on weekends goes somewhere to sit with girls. All this made me angry and annoyed, but the work was so much that by the time she came, I was sitting at the computer or already resting. I didn't have the energy to complain. In 2020, the pandemic began, and there were some changes in my work. I was sent to remote work. ACOM decreased, but not by much. I suggested that my wife also transferred to work from home and spend the summer and fall in the countryside. We have a nice house in which we have long wanted to make repairs. Not far away live my parents. The children could spend the vacations in the village and we in the cottage. Together we would do some repairs, take a break from the city and get close again. But my wife refused. And immediately and unquestioningly, again, I saw that haughty look of hers and her nose stuck up. According to her, their firm did not let anyone work at home, although I know for sure that many people have written applications, especially those who have children, and they were allowed to transfer to remote work. That said, she said it would be good for me and the kids to spend a few months outdoors. I was tired of fighting and decided it would be good for all of us to take a break from each other. That was like a sickle in the sack. The children and I spent 3 months in the countryside. On weekdays, I did repairs in the house and did my work remotely. And on weekends, I stayed with them in my parents' house. My wife visited 3 times, and my mother-in-law and father-in-law came once. We communicated normally. It's one thing, the first month we corresponded a lot and called each other, told each other news. She said that she missed me and the children and worked a lot. We made plans. I also came to town a few times. We went out with her, had crazy sex. Romance started to return in September. I brought the kids back and went back to finish the renovation. Everything broke down close to the new year when I was about to go back. She wrote, maybe you won't come for a while. I'm working a lot right now. Bosses are pushing. I need to think about what I want. The next day she calls and says she wants to break up. When I asked her why and whether she had someone, she said that she had fallen out of love. They said that over these months, she realized that I have not been in her life for a long time. I'm not interested in her, and in general, she only now began to feel that she lives. I repeated the question about a possible new man, to which she replied that we have not been living together for several months and not sleeping together even longer, and she would not want to discuss her personal life now. I accepted her offer of divorce and spent the next couple weeks planning the rest of my life. We called several times, talked about how we would fairly divide assets, how I would see the kids. Everything is adequate. I wanted to clarify the relationship to understand why exactly we were getting divorced. After all, I've worked hard for the good of our family, our children. If that's the only problem, it can be fixed. I decided to make an unannounced visit home this weekend. Anecdotal situation with a lover was not. But my wife was clearly going somewhere and was very angry that I showed up. She didn't really want to talk, but I finally got her emotional, and then I heard everything she thought about me. Turns out she stopped being happy with me after the birth of her second child. We were going out to work, changed things for a bit, but as soon as the gray everyday life returned, she wanted a divorce. And now that she has a good job, she's ready to do that. I supposedly had no interest in her or the kids. All I wanted was TV, beer and playing on the computer. About the fact that I spent almost 20 years pulling the family alone, she preferred not to remember, and when I remembered, got even angrier. In the end, she said that I was not a man, I had not aroused her for a long time, and had a negative impact on the children. I was getting fat while my mom was going to the gym and actively developing on all fronts. Picked up the necessary things and left for the village again. Since that moment, we almost do not communicate, and now I do not understand what I want. To return her or still divorce, all her words hurt me a lot and knocked the ground out from under my feet. I thought that my tasks to bring money to the family, to take my wife to shopping, children on circles, and the whole family on vacation. Communication with her parents, and help is included in the package. Honestly, this all feels like a betrayal on her part. What to do? That's the biggest question that's bothering me right now, because I don't know what I want. On the one hand, to return to prove, to teach her a lesson. On the other hand, I want to enjoy my freedom and start a new life. In my understanding, a wife is a support, a strong support for the husband. You relax, and the news of divorce is like a stab in the back from someone you thought was at least your friend. Maybe I did do something wrong. I make good money. I'm in a management position, but I've been like a delinquent boy in front of my wife for the last few years. Perhaps I felt that I was not giving her enough attention, and lately I spent too much time at work. There are fears. Of course, my wife is 39. She will still find a husband. I, on the other hand, in my mid-50s, I even flirted with someone for the last time about 5 years ago, not to mention how long there have been affairs on the side. I continue to follow her on social media, posts lots of new photos, looks happy in them. She's transformed in appearance. I saw her on a dating site. I know that she is definitely communicating with a man from her former job, heard from mutual friends, filing for divorce. In 8th grade, I wasn't popular. My effects were torn up books and all, and the whole class composed a request saying they would have rather not graduated with me. They didn't need me at the function. They didn't need me in the photos. They just didn't believe that anything should do with me. The whole class, with the exception of one. This young lady, Erin, was the only one out of 38 understudies to not sign it. And when I sat alone during break, she was the main one to endeavor to converse with me. I didn't want to converse with anybody, not to mention endeavoring to converse with a young lady. I had no clue about how to do that. She attempted one way or the other. At any rate, we arranged for the center a test to get into Catholic secondary school, and we'd mess around under the work area during coaching after school. We discussed how cool secondary school would be. And she observed every one of the miserable drawings I'd make of a kid heading back home alone in obscurity to 2 children playing patty cake in a recreation area. It was the most infatuation circumstance I knew. Truly, I never took action. I never needed to do anything alone with her, since I was terrified. I was, for absence of a superior term, a bitch. She had signal styles all over her, and I basically companion drafted the damnation out of it. Secondary school began, and primary school kids grew up. Erin and I lost track until I got back home to a tear-ridden mother. She informed me that Erin died and that the wake was in a couple of days. It didn't hit me right away. I attempted to accumulate my considerations, as this was the primary demise to crush me, as a matter of fact. I recollected how hard it would have been assuming she was never there, how that slimmer of any expectation of going through one more day together was gone, how those drawings of joy would never occur. How, on the off chance that I swung a foot under a work area, don't want to tap anybody, how I miss making somebody around me grin. The wake was what the 1-2 punch that hit me the hardest. Maybe everybody expected to shower me with information on the amount she adored me, and that she was so pleasant to me. It was the absolute most difficult experience of my life. It made me crazy that the most delightful individual in my life was the primary individual to leave me on this planet, and every other person expected to help me to remember it continually. In the event that I can simply send one message out to individuals out there, that assuming your story with the individual you love actually gets an opportunity, take it. Let them know how you feel and how much more brilliant your day is with them in your day-to-day existence. Let them know how decent their grin is. And the way that they're embraced makes you feel great inside. Try not to go through what I do and need to contemplate the person who will constantly, regardless of the amount I change myself, have moved away.
In my first year of high school, I was simply moving past a young lady who I'd loved since grade school, who shut me down in the most mean manner conceivable. You're a fat, revolting failure who won't ever add up to anything in a couple of years. All things considered, I'm 17 and as of now an honor-winning photographic artist. In any case, it was for the most part the year where my warm gestures bobbed, starting with one young lady, then on to the next, which was somewhat uncommon for me. That is, until I met her. There was this young lady that I realized through my theatrics class who was 2 years more established than me, and dazzling. I can't actually depict her. It isn't so much that I can't thin of the words, it's simply that I have such a large number of words. Her character was simply astounding, and she was a particularly brilliant individual to be near. I immediately became companions with her, and I realized I was partial to her, yet I didn't understand the amount I yearned for her until a couple of months after the fact. The start of sophomore year. Homecoming was coming up speedy, and I needed to really have a date this all year. Thus, while sitting with my companions in the show study hall conceptualizing a rundown of young ladies I can consider, I look across the room, visually engage with this young lady, and she grins at me. Just haphazardly, yet that grin softened me. It is certainly quite possibly of the most lovely thing about her. It was at that moment that I realized I needed to make her mine. I tracked down this charming approach to asking her to homecoming and ask her before show one day, to which she grins her flawless grin, embraces me, and kisses me on the cheek, however says, "Please accept my apologies. This is my last homecoming and I needed to go stag with my companions." That one hurt a lot, yet it was a decent rude awakening / life illustration in regards to the charming way to deal with asking out young ladies. The one potential gain was, interestingly, when a young lady let me know she was simply going to go with companions, she didn't deceive me about it. The experience didn't prod me from attempting to win her. However, as a matter of fact, it just revived the fire that caused my desire for her. Before long, I understood that I should have her in my life, and I concede my sophomore self became fringe fixated on her for an extremely brief time. However, I before long had reality looked at. It was close to this time, however, that I started to begin fostering my verse and tune composing abilities, so it was valuable. I'm not an exceptionally profound individual as a rule, and out of nowhere having this throbbing inclination when I didn't see her in the day was something truly new to me, and the main way I could adapt to it was working it out in stanza. Approaching the later 50% of my sophomore year, she started dating somebody, a person I knew, as a matter of fact, a person I admired who was 1 year more established than her and 3 more established than myself. He never knew about my kind gestures towards her, so I never truly accused him. However, I was undoubtedly squashed by this. I turned into somewhat surly, raging at my companions who were all in some way in cheerful connections while I was pitiably alone. It was anything but a good time, and for some time I believed it to be the most obscure piece of my new life. However, presently, it seems like daylight, rainbows, and feathery cats. A couple of months after the fact, while we started to float separated on the grounds that I felt like I would play the fool to risk her relationship, or more regrettable, mine with her, she moved out to pursue a higher education. I started my lesser year in secondary school. Half a month into the school year, one of my companions illuminates me that she was single once more. I started conversing with her once more, and everything was falling into place. Before long, winter split came up, and I was for the most part finished with saving my affections for her, which I had been endeavoring to do since her relationship. Yet, when I just found her beyond a general store one evening, basically everything I had done suppressing that large number of feelings for her recently detonated. Practically everything I had done to move beyond her was squandered. Soon thereafter, I recently hushed up about thinking, hello, perhaps in the event that I simply tell her how I believe, I can either cut off up in a friendship with her, or worst situation imaginable, will in any case be companions, and it'll be off my mind. Similar to Ted and Robin in the primary episode of Hymium. Sadly, neither have had opportunity and energy to meet, and I most certainly couldn't hold on until summer to announce my affection for her. So I concocted ways for me to tell her. A call could finish the work. However, consider the possibility that she's occupied or with companions. What about an email? Nah, excessively generic, as is I am. Gee, video talk? Nah, I simply could do without going through the web. I ought to think of her a letter. That is awesome. We both love mail, and truth be told, we have a month-to-month mail correspondence. So I spill my guts onto 3 pages of a transcribed, with a plume on material, I might add, letter. Presently, I don't precisely recollect what I said in the letter, yet I know its gist, which fundamentally told her the amount I cherished her, why I love her, and so forth. I began to say how, in the event that she doesn't exactly feel the same way about me, I comprehend. I'd trust we might in any case be companions, and simply fail to remember completely about this entire letter. The following day, I go to the mailing station, and when I drop that letter in the receptacle, I ponder internally, poop, this was a terrible idea. Furthermore, goody gumdrops, was I right? Presently, I knew from previous experience that it ought to just take perhaps all of 3 days to get to her. I figured she'd look out for it, think of me back, and I'd have my reaction in somewhere around 10 days plus or minus from the date I sent it, which was 2 days after New Year's. I never envisioned how much hanging tight for a letter might actually eat at me for those 10 days. However, soon it became 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 2 months, and it started to torment me. What's more awful is that she shut down all correspondence with me. I realized that letter held a great deal to take in, yet I didn't figure it would take such a long time. I started to feel that I truly messed everything up here. I shouldn't have sent the letter and demolished something extraordinary. I fired pounding myself since I assumed I was a nitwit for playing the fool. The multi-month point started the most obscure time of my life, which raised to where I was so furious with myself that I started to simply punch walls. In a real sense, punching walls. 3 months is... I started to drink when I found it took a great deal to get me tanked. I began getting pretty reckless right now. I severed a lot of ties with companions, since I was a harsh individual. I actually spent time with my nearby circles. However, at whatever point I could, I was never nearby around my companions. I turned out to be fairly pessimistic about affection, letting myself know I won't ever cherish a young lady from now on. In any case, observe. I not even once accused her. Fair myself. My companions started to imagine that this, as a matter of fact, was the most unfortunate thing about this entire experience. I obviously positioned her upon this platform, which fundamentally implied she couldn't possibly be at fault. Then being distraught at her for not composition back and essentially setting me into this pit of despondency, I just faulted myself for getting her in such a peculiar position where a person 2 years her lesser in admitting his affection in a letter. Following 5 months of torment, I genuinely don't have the words to portray. I at long last got a reaction. You got it. Not the most ideal reaction for my affection, yet it was a reaction nevertheless, which I found rather rapidly was the explanation I felt so tormented. Suppose you were somewhat dry, and you requested a glass of water. You never get your glass of water. Yet not just that, nobody lets you know that you're not getting that glass of water, and you're simply staying there endlessly pausing. Ultimately, you start to consider the reason why you requested water in any case. Perhaps you ask some unacceptable individual? No, you most certainly ask the ideal individual. However, for reasons unknown, they aren't providing you with that glass of water. You can live with that. Yet, the way that they didn't promptly let you know that they won't get you that glass of water begins to wear at you. Following 5 months of this pointless heck, one of our common companions at long last advises her that she really wants to hit me up. She sends me an email saying that she's sorry she never hit me up, and that she attempted a few times, however erased it at the prospect of me being disturbed when I read it. That's what she said. However, she realizes I realize the sentiments aren't responded. It was quite possibly of the most heartfelt motion that anybody's finished for her. Her reaction took a load off of me in a real sense. Toward the finish of the 5th month, I had started to believe that perhaps I was the self-centered one, since I needed more out of the companionship than I had. Those 5 months caused me to understand that as long as she's basically in my life, my days were better. Presently, right around 4 months after the fact, things are simply lively. I concede. I truly do in any case have a firm opinion about her still. Yet I have acknowledged that it just won't work out, and I can't prevent myself from figuring what might have occurred assuming I met her further down the road. I really do accept she might have been an ideal one for me. However, I have additionally acknowledged that I was only not the most ideal one for her. And that's all there is to it.
So, several years ago, I met this girl in college. We wound up sitting close to one another in a jazz appreciation class. She was active and coy and very hot. Not in a Hathaway Port and porcelain doll sort of way. However, Kirsten Dunst, I could really see myself with this young lady sensibly sort of way. She was amusing, clever, and had the best character. I immediately fostered a pulverize of pretty substantial extents. We became exceptionally close as companions, closer than that feared friend zone. We discussed everything under the sun, a degree of profound closeness that terrified and interested me. She knew my privilege, insights as a whole, and I knew all of hers. We even aided each other through a few quite terrible times. Me going to prison for accomplishing something moronic and her becoming very ill and being in the clinic for a few days. I was acquainted with her family and she to mine. In any case, we never appeared to be single simultaneously. At the point when we met, she was dating somebody and I was single. Following a while, the dejection made me begin looking for friendship and I met another young lady. Not as hot, not as wise, but rather an evil spirit in the sack and more seasoned than me by quite a while. A touch of the good old Mrs. Robinson was all that could possibly be needed to stick the adoration blinders on. So when my most memorable crush unexpectedly and fiercely became single, her ex beat on her, unbeknownst to me, however got found out. I was excessively delighted to seek after what might have been a superior decision. I remained with the definitely just to figure out 2 years after the fact that, of course, was undermining me. I raced to my crush, looking for the solace that Maine, nearby and dear companion could give. We wound up in bed together, and however, it was quite a long time back, I actually have very clear recollections of what we did. To say she was astounding is putting it mildly. And to say we were astonishing together is downright bizarrely lacking. To put it obtusely, we broke the bed and in the board reached us 2 times about the clamor. When things settled down at home, for me, things got awful for her. Family issues. She expected to move to assist her mother and kin with managing a drunkard and harmful dad who was being separated and expelled. Without a doubt. It won't be super durable, she said. Only for a brief period. I shouldn't have held nothing back from her. That move was the mark of the end for any likely arrangements on the grounds that unavoidably she met somebody like it was the content of a terrible film. The person she met is a hero. I need to concede. I like him. He's great to her. He's shrewd, maybe more so than me. And that is saying something, shares a ton of interest with her, and in particular causes her to feel regarded and blissful. As of late, went to their wedding. I'm with a really superb lady now whom I love to death and completely need to eat since she's the individual I need to go through my time on earth with. In any case, there was a twinge watching those two say their commitments, a twinge of desire and outrage, a twinge of fuck that might have been me. That could be me saddest. Assuming I'd had about an additional 5 weeks of being single. Between her ex parting ways with her and my ex and I starting to date, we'd most likely be hitched at the present time. Possibility is the most flighty escort I've at any point met.
I'm hoping that pouring my lil heart out may keep me from thinking about it tonight. Okay, so we are both from small town Ohio and graduated high school the same year, but went to different schools. We will call him James. I was kind of a wild woman and had recently graduated, so I was going out to parties a lot, and the majority of those gatherings turned out to be in his old neighborhood. We meet, and as unromantic as it sounds, we dominated 10 matches of lager pong straight as accomplices. Administration, which is really amazing. Yet, this was a late spring of defiance for myself, thus I didn't contemplate it. Not many days after the fact, I'm on point, which is peculiar on the grounds that it wasn't even truly famous any longer. 9 to give you a thought, and get an im from him. We talk, and I give him my number. We are both going out the very party that Friday. Great stuff. Well, I don't recollect what occurred at that specific party. However, I really do realize that we developed extremely close that mid-year. We would message the entire day, and I would see him consistently. We would head out to either my vehicle or his and burst and simply talk, with the seething party continuing and neither of us giving it a second thought. I would come visit him at work. He would drive me around to his number 1 places and recount his recollections with them. There is this lake we would go out and sit by, and it was so lovely. Well, he unquestionably loved me. However, I was a horribly moronic 17-year-old young lady. He would commend me, and we would kiss and snuggle and simply love all on one another. Just issue was, I was additionally kissing on his companion. How about we call him Ware? Ware, is this normally Doche troublemaker, and James an old-fashioned cowboy with an enormous heart? Who do you suppose my chemical-filled self was more intrigued by? Yeah, stupid. In any case, regardless of my nonsensicalness, James actually spent time with me and conversed with me constantly, and that was the most astounding summer of my life. I pass on to Pennsylvania for school, and he went to an in-state school. We actually talked like insane, messaging point. I had been with a person all through high school named Charlie, and got back with him when I set off for college. He was in the naval force and a fucking jerk. However, we had history, and I was scared to be away from home, and it support me. Well, I ended up having Point Lumberjack put up from way in a difficult spot then. At that point, I took a gander at my old talks with James, and I fucking enlightened him concerning Charlie like we had no set of experiences by any means, and he was so sweet, yet I realized that needed to have harmed him. Like I simply want to facepalm at this moment. In addition to the fact that I haphazardly make out with his companion Ware at parties while we are talking, yet after that, I enlighten him regarding my affection for Charlie and how hard it is with him being so distant. Knowing the past truly causes me to recoil now and again. We actually hang when I'm home, and he would continuously ask when I was returning and make arrangements with me and so on. Man, we generally had a great time as well, simply talking and chuckling and partaking in every other's organization. Circumstances don't pan out with Charlie. However, James I actually talk, though not so much as in the past, but rather that checks out. He causes problems and winds up moving with the remainder of his family to Texas. Didn't irritate me too horrendously at that point, yet at the same time sucked 'cause he was one of my #1 individuals to spend time with. Sophomore year in school, James, I actually talk inconsistently, yet I was dating one more new person. Once more, junior year, I'm single. Without precedent for seemingly my whole grown-up life, I've gleaned some useful knowledge from Charlie and my latest ex, and I simply needed to be single and spotlight on myself. Around Halloween that year, I return home and one more companion of James is home. Let's call him Boris in light of the fact that obviously I'm a hoochie and have had such a large number of men in my day-to-day existence. Haha. Well, we get squandered, and for reasons unknown, we attach despite the fact that I have never thought that he is appealing. Yuck. Well, I converse with Boris to a great extent, and I realize he enjoys me, however I couldn't care less. James says he is returning home for Thanksgiving. Yahoo! I let him know that I am so eager to see him, and I mean it sincerely. I hadn't understood the amount I missed him. I return home and don't even for 1 second consider Boris being home then as well. Fuck. All things considered, Boris is having a little party so normally. James and I are both in participation. Boris is attempting to be coy, however I unmitigatedly disregard his advances. Boris heads to sleep, anticipating that I should follow. However, I keep awake with James and one more companion until 7 am simply drinking and visiting like we are both 17 once more and that 3 years haven't passed. We wind up resting on a similar sofa, and he cuddles dependent upon me, and goodness God, I can in any case feel it. It resembles that second caused me to acknowledge what a fucking fool I had been. He had all that I needed and had consistently acknowledged me, despite the fact that I'm a fucking bonehead more often than not. I think he attempted to kiss me. I don't recall that I was truly squandered yet. I awakened close to him the following day and was blissful. I didn't really mind how frantic Boris was. Well, the following night, I believe I'm truly going to lay it on him and tell him how I feel. Yeah. Well, rather, I get shit-faced and vomit all over myself before a whole room brimming with Poeple, including James. Ha ha! So impeded. Goodness in the kicker. Boris then attempts to cuddle with me while I'm dropped on the love seat. Adorable, right? I tell James I need to see him again before he returns to Texas. I want to go to that lovely lake he took me to. He says we will, yet we really don't. I think he left sooner than expected, or recently said that since face, it assuming there was ever the flicker of a shot, I previously blew it. Presently, it's our senior year of school. I'm still in Dad and he in Tex. I saw him this previous summer and we went out to that lake. Sat close to it and talked for a couple of hours, not the entire night like we used to. Yet, essentially, he actually wants my organization, right? God, he looked perfect. We've both addled so much. He used to be drastically Christian, and I non-believer. I'm in physical science. He does math. We have become so comparable, in totally better places. He actually lets me know I'm a virtuoso too, which implies such a lot of coming from him. I let him know through text how I felt after he left. All right, I was somewhat a pussy about it. Something as per on the off chance that you at any point end up searching for a lady, I'll continuously be obsessed with you, which, given my history, likely doesn't mean a lot. He answered with a confusing, I don't actually have any idea what to say. Says thanks to, I suppose I'm sorry nothing at any point occurred between us. Miserable, I know it precisely. Which I'm expecting implies friend zone. Yet, I don't fucking have any idea. I've been messaging him about once like clockwork. Arbitrary stuff, to tell him I contemplate him. He checks in with me as well. Really had him call me last week about a physical science issue, yet I feel like I demolished it and acknowledged past the point of no return that he means quite a bit to me. He is all that I need, and he has been there from the beginning. I can't envision a superior match, regardless of how long it's been since the last time we talked. It resembles not a solitary day has passed. I would rather not let him know again through text. However, I know when he will be home once more. I simply believe he should know that. Yeah, it's likely 4 years past the point of no return, yet I really do adore him. For what his identity is, for what his identity was, and for who he will develop to be. I simply wish that I could be the lady close by empowering him as he develops significantly more, and having him to hold me in those solid arms of his and encouraging me. Woe is me.
From that dating experience, I learned that this world is shitty and people you think you can trust will leave you at your lowest. Even if we're back to being friends, I will still hate what she did to me. I was single for a year after a tough breakup that molded me for character development. In this year, I met some new friends. In the center of these friends, I met two of my future exes, one good future ex and the other. You're about to find out. I watched this particular ex have a relationship with some dude, and every time they were around each other, they'd PDA. Since I'm not a piece of shit, I left her alone and focused on me. Fast forward a few months. I get into a relationship with someone I had met at camp at. She's my stalker. I didn't realize it until about a year later. We date for 2 months, and I broke up with her due to a fight she had with my mom at 10 at night when I was asleep. I was upset that I made her cry, but I needed to move on with my life, and so I did. Little did I know my friend's boyfriend dumped her for someone else, and she was crushed. I tried to cheer her up any way that I could until I accidentally confessed my feelings for her. The next week in school, she confessed back to me, and I found a way to ask her out, and she said yes. We dated, and she ended up being my first kiss. We were inseparable. That is until I went to camp again. The first visitation from the outside world, she was there, and we spent some good time together before I had to go back to camp. Skipping forward, I get back home the next week, and I get a notification from her YouTube channel, and it was an update cake fashion video. I watched it, and around the 20-minute mark, she confessed to me through video that she had feelings for another ex-boyfriend of hers. Found was in the video with her hanging out at her house. My heart was in a million pieces. I tried to keep my composure, but the tears started falling and I couldn't stop it. A few weeks of talking to her about it goes by, and finally her birthday comes. She had a birthday party. I wasn't invited by her ex-boyfriend from the video was. So my mom persuades her to invite me. Please don't think I was some sort of mommy's boy or something. My mom is quite a bully without cause. So I showed up with her favorite flowers, and he showed up with a rock. Her friends were there. He was there. She was downstairs hiding from me. The party goes on, and it comes time for close to the end of the party, and she literally runs away from me full force down her street. She comes back and says, "We need to take a break for a while," pecks me on the lips. She then tells me that she and her best friend had a small interaction with each other, and they both laughed at my reaction. And she tells me to not cry, and that's when I called my ride and went home. For the next year of high school, the friend cited her saying that I had to do something to make her break up with me, even though she's the one that cheated on me numerous times. I went from hell to proving that I never needed her or that group of friends. I proved I was a better singer than her. I proved I was a better student than her. And hell, I even proved I was a better person than her. We ended up rekindling our friendship 3 years later, but every time she's rude to me, I don't take the high. When I was in high school, had this gathering of companions that were very close. There was one young lady among them. We should call her Ashley, which I really liked. In any case, I was extremely modest then at that point and didn't make any meaningful difference either way. Yet early on, I assume I was enamored with her. Looking back now, I think she loved me too, as she gave out this multitude of signs, which I was too dumb to even consider seeing, so nothing truly occurred. Indeed, even my companions then, at that point, used to prod me about it, yet I generally denied my affections for her. So this happened for quite a long time, and we remained old buddies. Even after I left early abroad for uni, we somewhat floated separated a little. In any event, when she approached a similar city as me for uni, we didn't hang out so a lot. One summer, however, while back home, one of my dearest companions approached me one day and inquired as to whether it was all right by me on the off chance that he began seeing her. I was crushed, yet I actually denied my affections for herself and let him know it was all right by me. Somewhat lament not doing anything quite a while in the past, and it took me a really long time to move past her. In any case, I let myself know that everything worked out as Ashley and my companion are joyfully hitched, and they appear to make each other exceptionally blissful. I actually think of them as my dearest companions, and Ashley is still continuously paying special attention to me. Their satisfaction has certainly assisted me with moving past her at last. In any case, the genuine story I expected to get off my chest is about another young lady. We should call her Betty. Betty and Ashley were dearest companions in secondary school. At the point when I went abroad, it happened that she went simultaneously as me to a similar city. In any case, we went to various schools. Us being away from home in another city, we turned out to be very old buddies, and we hung out, talked on the telephone a great deal. However, around then, I had no affections for her, most presumably because I actually cared deeply about Ashley, and don't figure she accomplished for me either, as she would continuously enlighten me concerning every one of the folks she met and who she enjoyed and so on. In any case, she began seeing this fellow, and he didn't appear to get a kick out of the chance to spend time with our gathering of companions, so we began to float separated. I would just see her sometimes, ordinarily during my birthday. She was truly into the fellow, and I think she was completely planning on wedding him. However, for reasons unknown, it didn't end up actually working, and they separated after a significant number of years. Understanding that every one of her companions around then were really his companions, she began to spend time with us once more, and she was taking the separation quite hard. And since I was the main single one on the gathering at the time, we began hanging out a great deal and turned out to be truly close once more. She was involving me for organization. I surmise I was involving her for the equivalent. At the time we began hanging out again, I was dating several young ladies, yet never truly went past the initial not many dates. One just got off a drawn-out relationship and simply needed to explore every available opportunity in the other. When one of her companions showed interest, she lost interest in me. This was while subsequent to spending time with Betty, again for a couple of months, I fell truly hard for Betty. It was abnormal reason we have forever been close. However, I never truly felt as such for her previously. As a matter of fact, I don't think I at any point had such unmistakable inclinations for anybody, since Ashley likely significantly more. It took me in a additional couple of months, yet I at long last got the boldness to tell her how I felt. Despite the fact that I was almost certain she didn't feel the same way, it took a strange turn. I completely expected to get dismissed, yet I didn't anticipate that myself should accept it so hard. I generally let myself know I would have rather not lost her as a companion, so I made a good attempt to push the fellowship along. However, it was excessively off kilter. Surmise I made a good attempt as it reached the place that she was unable to try to look at me without flinching when I attempted to converse with her. Here in a final desperate attempt, I told her I needed to attempt to seek after it. However, she straight said no. I really tried to understand and eased off staying away from her for a couple months. Gradually began to move past her, or so I thought. Presently, a gathering of us, counting Betty, was going on a multi-week occasion to Europe. We had previously arranged this before I opened my motor mouth, and everything was reserved, so I was unable to retreat. I made plans to make the best out of the excursion and sever all contact later. As of now, I had scarcely addressed her in months, so I was fearing the ungainliness during the outing. However, it was much more dreadful. During the excursion, I fell much harder for her. Spending basically day in and day out with her for a considerable length of time was difficult for me. Furthermore, she didn't help what is going on either, as she showed no cumbersomeness any longer, and it was like we were dearest companions once more. We had an incredible outing, and in any event, when we kicked ease, we off visiting a great deal once more. In any case, clearly she realized I actually had these affections for her. Could she be that way on the off chance that she didn't sort of feel something? The interest was killing me, so I told her that I actually cared deeply about her. She clearly realized this, however, said she didn't feel something similar. I got some information about the absence of ungainliness. She just said I didn't cause to feel abnormal any longer. So I understood from my own psychological well-being, I needed to ease off. So I told her I really want to have some time off from our companionship. She said she comprehended. I didn't talk or see her for quite some time until 2 days prior was a gathering supper for a birthday of a common companion. We didn't address each other by any means. It will be her birthday this Sunday. I will most likely go and not address her again other than saying cheerful birthday. Do I suppose she's the one? Likely not. Do I see a future with her? I don't have any idea. However, what I cannot deny is that I have never felt like this for any young lady previously, and I can't deal with it. I stick on to every single piece of trust that one day she will feel the same way, despite the fact that during our companionship, I esteemed our fellowship more than she did. I actually contemplate her pretty much consistently, despite the fact that we don't talk.